Hello, English learners. Welcome to English in Advance. I am Jessica, your host for today, and it is such a pleasure to be here with you in your English learning journey. We're going to embark on a journey that I believe is one of the most important steps in becoming truly fluent in English. It's the journey from translating in your head to thinking directly in English. This single shift can dramatically change how you sound, how you feel when you speak, and how naturally you can communicate your ideas. It's the key that unlocks spontaneous, confident, and fluent speech. Many learners get stuck at an intermediate level, a place where they know a lot of grammar and vocabulary, but their conversations feel slow and robotic and tiring. Does that sound familiar? You have a brilliant idea in your mind, in your native language. But when you try to express it in English, it feels like there's a traffic jam in your brain. You're mentally searching for words, translating sentence structures, and by the time you're ready to speak, the moment has passed. Today, we're going to explore how to clear that traffic jam. We'll do this through a story about a man named Ethan who was facing this exact problem. As we follow his experience, we won't just be listening. We'll be learning the practical techniques he used to change the way his brain processed English. This isn't about memorizing more rules. It's about rewiring your mind. So find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin our practice session together. Let's meet Ethan. Ethan worked as a data analyst for a large international marketing firm. He was exceptionally good at his job. He could see patterns in numbers that others missed, and his reports were always meticulous and insightful. In the quiet world of spreadsheets and databases, he was a king. He could manipulate data with a skill that was almost artistic. His native language was rich and expressive, and in it he could explain complex ideas with elegance and precision. The problem was English. His company was global, and English was the official language for all meetings, presentations, and client communications. And in those situations, Ethan felt like a completely different person. He wasn't the confident expert he knew himself to be. He was a hesitant, fumbling student. Let's step into a typical Tuesday morning meeting with him. The conference room was bright, the air conditioning humming softly. Around a long, polished oak table sat his team. There was Daniel, the team lead, whose voice was always confident and clear. Nina from the creative department, who spoke with a quick, energetic rhythm, and a few others. They were discussing the quarterly performance report for a major client. Ethan knew this report inside and out. He had spent the last 2 weeks deeply immersed in the data. He had discovered a fascinating trend in customer engagement that could significantly boost the client's next campaign. He was actually excited to share it. Daniel started the discussion. All right, team, let's look at the engagement metrics on page 5. The numbers are solid, but I feel like we're missing an opportunity here. Any initial thoughts? Immediately, an idea sparked in Ethan's mind. In his native language, the thought was perfect, a beautifully formed sentence. The data indicates that while overall engagement is stable, the under 25 demographic is showing a significant drop-off after the first interaction, which suggests our follow-up content isn't resonating with them. It was clear, concise, and actionable. Now the internal process began. It was like a clumsy factory inside his head. First, the translation department had to kick into gear. The data indicates? He thought. Okay, the data shows, or the data suggests. Which one sounds more professional? He settled on suggests. while overall engagement is stable. That's fairly direct. The under 25 demographic, yes, that's the correct term, is showing a significant drop-off. Wait, is drop-off the right word? Maybe decline or decrease? Drop-off felt a bit too informal. He mentally scanned his vocabulary files. Let's go with decline. After the first interaction, that's okay, which suggests our follow-up content isn't resonating with them. The word resonating, it felt right, but was it too advanced? Would connecting be better? Or maybe appealing? While this frantic mental translation was happening, the real world didn't wait. Nina, from the creative team, leaned forward. "Looking at the visuals we used, Daniel," she said smoothly, "I think they might be a bit too corporate for the younger audience. They feel static. Perhaps we need something more dynamic, more video-based to hold their attention." Her point was good, and it was related to his, but it wasn't the core issue he had identified in the data. The conversation started to move in that direction, towards visuals and video content. Ethan's perfect moment was slipping away. He finally assembled his sentence, a little clunky now, a Frankenstein's monster of translated parts. He opened his mouth to speak, but by then, Daniel was already responding to Nina. "That's a great point, Nina. Let's explore some video concepts for the next quarter." Ethan closed his mouth. The moment was gone. He felt a familiar wave of frustration wash over him. It was like standing behind a thick glass wall. He could see and understand everything perfectly, but he couldn't participate in a meaningful way. His brilliant insight, the one he had worked so hard to uncover, remained locked inside his head, lost in translation. He spent the rest of the meeting in silence, just nodding along, feeling invisible. He wasn't just an analyst, he was a ghost at the table, present but not truly there. This feeling was becoming more and more common, a constant weight on his professional life. He knew he was capable of so much more, if only he could bridge the gap between his thoughts and his words. After the meeting, Ethan returned to his desk, the feeling of disappointment sitting heavily in his chest. He stared at the screen filled with the very data he was unable to talk about, feeling a profound sense of disconnect. Just then, his direct manager, Mr. Evans, walked over to his cubicle. Mr. Evans was a fair but demanding boss, a man who valued clear communication above all else. "Ethan," he said, his tone neutral, "a word in my office." Ethan's heart sank a little. He followed Mr. Evans into the glass-walled office and sat down. Mr. Evans got straight to the point. "The quarterly review with our European partners is in 3 weeks. It's a major one. They're deciding whether to extend our contract for the next 2 years. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I've seen your analysis on their account. It's brilliant. Truly top-notch work, Ethan. Nobody understands their data better than you do." Ethan felt a small flicker of pride, but he knew what was coming next. "For that reason," Mr. Evans continued, "I want you to lead the presentation, not just prepare the slides. I want you to walk them through your findings. You'll have the first 20 minutes of the call." The air left Ethan's lungs. It felt less like an opportunity and more like a sentence. Present to the European partners. For 20 minutes? The thought sent a jolt of pure panic through him. In a small team meeting, he couldn't even manage to say one sentence. How was he supposed to command a high-stakes international call for 20 minutes? He imagined the awkward silences, the fumbled words, the confused faces on the other end of the video call. He tried to protest, to find a way out. "Mr. Evans, I appreciate the confidence, but perhaps Daniel would be better. He is the team lead and his presentation skills are excellent." Mr. Evans gave him a firm look. "Daniel can handle the Q&A, but this is your data, Ethan. Your insights. I need them to hear it directly from the source, with your conviction. This is a big step for you and for us. Don't let me down." There was no room for argument. It was decided. Ethan walked out of the office in a daze. The opportunity he should have been thrilled about felt like an impending disaster. He had 3 weeks. 3 weeks to transform himself from a silent analyst into a confident presenter. He had no idea how he was going to do it. The problem wasn't the data, it was the delivery. The problem wasn't his intelligence, it was the English language that stood like a mountain before him. That afternoon, Ethan couldn't focus on his work. The numbers on his screen seemed to mock him. He felt overwhelmed and completely lost. He decided he needed some fresh air and a strong coffee. He headed down to the small cafe in the lobby of their office building. As he stood in line, staring blankly at the menu, a cheerful voice beside him said, "Tough day?" He turned to see a woman from the design department. Her name was Clara. He didn't know her well, but he recognized her friendly face from the office hallways. She always had a sketchbook with her and a splash of paint on her jeans. She had a warm, approachable energy. Ethan managed a weak smile. "You could say that. Just got some big news." "Good big news, or I need 3 espressos big news?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with genuine curiosity. "Definitely the 3 espressos kind," Ethan confessed, a bit surprised at his own honesty. They ordered their coffees and found a small table in the corner. For some reason, Ethan felt comfortable talking to Clara. Maybe it was because she wasn't on his team, so there was no pressure. Maybe it was just her kind expression. He found himself telling her everything about the meeting that morning, his constant struggle with translating in his head, and the terrifying presentation that was now looming over him. Clara listened patiently, nodding thoughtfully. She didn't interrupt or offer easy platitudes like, "Don't worry, you'll be fine." When he'd finished, she took a sip of her latte and looked at him. "I get it," she said softly. "I really do. I spent a year studying art in Japan. I had a basic grasp of the language, but I was exactly like you. I would have these huge ideas about my art in my head, but when I tried to explain them to my professor, it came out like a child's drawing. It was so frustrating." Ethan was taken aback. He had never considered that a native English speaker might have faced the same problem in another language. It made him feel less alone. "So what did you do?" he asked, leaning in. "Well," Clara said, "I tried everything. Flashcards, grammar apps, classes. They all helped a little, but the real change happened when my professor gave me some strange advice. He told me to stop trying so hard. He told me to stop translating." "Stop translating?" Ethan echoed. "But how do you do that? It just happens automatically." "Exactly," she said with a smile. "It's a habit. And you have to replace a bad habit with a good one. He told me to do something that felt incredibly silly at first. He told me to become a narrator." "A narrator?" Ethan was confused. "Yes," Clara explained, "a narrator of my own life, in Japanese." He said, "From the moment you wake up, start describing what you are doing, seeing and thinking in simple, basic Japanese. Out loud if you can, or just in your head if you're in public." She demonstrated for him. In a soft voice, she said, "I am sitting in a cafe. I am drinking a latte. The coffee is warm. I am talking to my colleague, Ethan. He looks worried, but he also looks curious. She then switched back to her normal voice. It's that simple. You don't try to say complex things. You just describe the immediate reality. I am turning on my computer. I am opening my email. This chair is not very comfortable. I am walking to the kitchen. I am getting a glass of water. Ethan was skeptical. That's it? That's what helped you? It was the start of everything, Clara insisted, because what it does is it forces your brain to connect words directly to actions and objects without the middleman of your native language. You're not thinking, I am walking in your language, and then translating it. You are just walking. And the English words, I am walking, are happening at the same time. You're building a new direct pathway in your brain. It's like instead of taking a long, winding country road to get to a destination, you're building a direct highway. This was where I, Jessica, want to pause for a moment and really emphasize what Clara is describing. This technique, often called the narration method or internal monologue, is one of the most powerful tools for breaking the translation habit. When you translate, your brain is doing 3 steps. 1, you have a thought in your native language. 2, you search for the equivalent words and grammar in English. 3, you speak the English words. This process is slow and mentally exhausting. The narration method cuts out the first 2 steps. It forces you to operate entirely within the English language framework from the very beginning. It connects your direct experience of the world, seeing a cup, feeling thirsty, walking down a hall, directly to English words. It might feel silly, and your sentences will be very simple at first. That's not just okay. It's the entire point. You are laying a new foundation. So as we continue with Ethan's story, I want you to start thinking about how you could apply this. What are you doing right now? Try to form a simple sentence in your head. I am listening to a story. I am sitting on a chair. I am feeling interested. This is the first step. Now, let's get back to Ethan and Clara. Ethan was still processing this idea. It sounded so simple, almost too simple to work for such a complex problem. So I just talk to myself in my head all day? In very basic English? Exactly, Clara confirmed. Don't judge yourself. Don't worry if you don't know a word. If you don't know the word for stapler, just say, I am picking up the thing for papers. The goal isn't to have a perfect vocabulary. The goal is to keep your brain in English mode. It's like warming up an engine. You can't expect to go from a cold start to 100 miles per hour. You need to let it run for a while. By narrating your day, you're keeping the English engine running softly in the background, all day long. She leaned forward, her expression serious but encouraging. Try it, Ethan. Just for one afternoon. What do you have to lose? Narrate your walk back to your desk. Narrate the emails you're writing. Just try. See how it feels. Ethan thought about his dead-end frustration and the terrifying presentation. Compared to that, talking to himself in his head seemed like a small, strange, but harmless experiment. He looked at Clara and felt a tiny spark of hope, the first he had felt all day. Okay, he said, taking a deep breath. Okay, I'll try it. I'm walking back to my desk. Clara laughed, a bright, happy sound. There you go. You've already started. As Ethan walked away from the cafe, he felt self-conscious, even though the narration was only happening inside his head. Okay. Here I go, he thought. I am walking. I am walking on a gray carpet. I see my colleague, Sophia, at the water cooler. She is smiling. I am walking past the marketing department. The posters on the wall are very colorful. It felt awkward. The sentences were childishly simple. His brain kept wanting to jump back to his native language, where his thoughts were nuanced and sophisticated. But he remembered Clara's advice. Don't judge. Just do it. He reached his desk. I am sitting down in my chair. The chair makes a small squeaking noise. I am looking at my computer screen. There are many numbers on the screen. He had to write an email to a colleague to request some files. Normally, he would compose the entire email in his head in his native language and then carefully translate it word for word. This time, he decided to try something different. He tried to build the email directly in English, using his simple narration method. Okay, I need to write to David, he thought. Simple, direct. I need the sales data. What is the subject line? Request for sales data. Good. Now the email. Hi, David. That is easy. I hope you are having a good week. No, that feels too formal, maybe. How about, hope you're well? Yes, that is better. Now, the main point. I need the data. I am writing to request the sales data for Q3. Perfect. Could you please send it to me when you have a moment? That is polite. Thank you. Best regards, Ethan. He read the email over. It was much simpler than the ones he usually wrote. His translated emails were often full of complex clauses and long sentences, an attempt to mirror the sophistication of his native language. This one was direct, clear, and perfectly effective. He hit send with a strange sense of lightness. The whole process had taken him less than half the usual time, and it was far less stressful. He continued the exercise for the rest of the afternoon. I am highlighting these cells in yellow. I am taking a sip of water. My computer is making a humming sound. I feel a little tired. He noticed something interesting. When he didn't know a word, his brain would feel a small, itchy gap. For example, he looked at the device that held his pens and pencils. He knew the word in his language, but in English, he had no idea. I am putting my pen into the pen thing, the pen holder. The word suddenly popped into his head, a word he had probably learned years ago, but had never used because he always relied on translation. By forcing himself to stay in English mode, he was accessing parts of his vocabulary that had been dormant. He was beginning to see what Clara meant. It wasn't about learning new things. It was about building new connections, making the English part of his brain more active and accessible. It was like exercising a muscle that he hadn't used in a long time. It was a bit sore and weak at first, but he could already feel it starting to wake up. For the first time, he felt a flicker of agency over his problem. Maybe, just maybe, he could do this. The mountain of the presentation still seemed huge, but he had found a small single step he could take to begin the climb. A few days later, Ethan was starting to feel the subtle effects of his constant narration practice. The voice in his head was still simple, but it was becoming more automatic. He would catch himself thinking, I need to make coffee directly in English, without the initial thought in his native tongue. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. He saw Clara in the office kitchen and went over to thank her. Clara, hi, he started. I wanted to thank you for your advice the other day. The narrator thing. She smiled warmly. Oh, you're trying it? How's it going? It feels strange, Ethan admitted, but I think it's helping. I wrote an email the other day without translating it first. It was faster, easier. That's fantastic, Ethan. That's the first big hurdle, she said, genuinely pleased. Once you start creating thoughts directly in English, even simple ones, you're on the right path. But that's just step one. Ethan's face fell slightly. Just step one? Think of it like learning to play the piano, she explained. The narration practice is like practicing your scales. You're getting your fingers, or in this case your brain, used to the basic movements. It's essential. But you can't play a whole song with just scales. The next step is to start playing simple tunes. You need to start managing real, interactive conversations. Ethan immediately thought of the meeting where he had frozen. That's the part I'm terrible at, he said. When someone asks me a question, my mind just goes blank. All the narration practice disappears, and the old translation habit comes rushing back. That's completely normal, Clara reassured him. It's because the pressure is on. You feel like you have to give a perfect, intelligent answer immediately, but fluent speakers don't always do that. Have you ever noticed? Ethan thought about it. He remembered Daniel in meetings. Sometimes, when asked a tough question, Daniel wouldn't answer right away. He'd say something first. Fluent speakers use what I call thinking phrases. Clara continued, seeming to read his mind. They are like little bridges. They give your brain a few extra seconds to think and form a response, but to the listener, it just sounds like a natural part of the conversation. You don't have an awkward silence. You have a smooth transition. This was a revelation to Ethan. He had always focused on the nouns, verbs, and adjectives. He had never paid attention to these filler phrases. What kind of phrases? He asked, pulling out his phone to take notes. Oh, there are tons, Clara said, leaning against the counter. For example, if someone asks for your opinion instead of freezing, you can start with, "That's a great question. It's polite. It gives you a moment and it makes the other person feel good." Or you could say, "Let me think about that for a second." It explicitly tells them you need a moment to process. It's honest and natural. She continued, if you want to share an opinion, you can use phrases like, "Well, from my perspective," or "the way I see it is," or a simple, "to be honest." These phrases act as a launch pad for your main idea. They get the words flowing before you even get to the complicated part of your thought. Let's pause here again. Jessica, your guide, wants to highlight the importance of what Clara is teaching Ethan. These thinking phrases, sometimes called filler phrases or discourse markers, are the secret ingredient to sounding natural and fluent. B1 and B2 learners often have good grammar and vocabulary, but their speech can sound choppy because they don't use these phrases. They speak in a series of direct, factual sentences. Native speakers, however, constantly use phrases like, "Well, I guess you could say that, actually, as a matter of fact." These phrases don't add much literal meaning, but they add rhythm, personality, and flow to the conversation. They are the oil that makes the engine of conversation run smoothly. So a great practice for you is to start noticing these phrases when you listen to native speakers in movies, podcasts, or meetings. Don't just listen for what they are saying. Listen for how they are saying it. How do they start their sentences? How do they pause to think? Let's listen to a few more examples Clara gives Ethan. Another useful set of phrases, Clara went on, is for when you need to structure your thoughts. You can say things like, "There are a couple of points I'd like to make. First, This signals to the listener that you have an organized thought coming, and it also helps you organize it in your own mind. Or if you're not completely sure about something, instead of staying silent, you can say, "I could be wrong, but it seems to me that," or, "Off the top of my head, I'd say." These lower the pressure. You're not claiming to have the perfect final answer. You're just contributing to the conversation. Ethan was furiously typing these phrases into his phone. They were like a set of magic keys he had never known existed. They weren't vocabulary for his reports. They were tools for real-time conversation. "Your homework now," Clara said with a playful grin, "is to practice these. But not in a high-pressure situation like a work meeting. That's like trying to play your first piano recital at Carnegie Hall. You need a safe place to practice. You need low-stakes conversations." "Low-stakes conversations?" Ethan asked. "Yes, interactions where it doesn't matter if you make a mistake," she explained. "The person you buy your coffee from every morning, instead of just saying, 'Latte, please,' ask them a question. 'How's your day going so far?' Or, 'Wow, it's busy in here today, isn't it?' When they answer, really listen and try to use one of your new phrases. If they say, 'It's been a really busy morning,' you can reply, 'Well, I can imagine. It seems like everyone needs coffee today.' See? It's a tiny, simple conversation. There are no consequences if it's a bit awkward. The goal is just to practice the mechanics of a real-time exchange." She suggested other ideas: chatting with the security guard in the lobby, making small talk with someone in the elevator, asking a shop assistant a question about a product, even if he didn't intend to buy it. "Every one of these small interactions is a chance to practice," she concluded. "You're combining the narration method in your head with these thinking phrases out loud. It connects your internal English world with the external one." Ethan felt a surge of motivation. This was a plan, a real, actionable plan. It wasn't just some vague advice like, "Practice more." It was a series of concrete steps: narrate internally, learn thinking phrases, and practice in low-stakes conversations. The massive, terrifying mountain of the presentation now looked like a series of smaller hills he could climb, one by one. The next morning, Ethan walked into the lobby cafe with a new mission. His heart was beating a little faster than usual. The barista, a young man named Ben with friendly eyes, was at the counter. Normally, Ethan would just state his order. Today, he was going to try something different. He took a deep breath. "Okay, Ethan, low stakes." "Good morning," Ethan began. "Morning. What can I get for you?" Ben replied cheerfully. "I'll have the usual latte, please," Ethan said. Then he took the plunge. "It seems a bit quiet in here this morning." Ben smiled. "Yeah, it comes in waves. Give it 10 minutes and it'll be crazy." Now what? Ethan's mind started a search for a reply. He could feel the old translation habit trying to take over. Instead, he reached for one of his new tools. Thinking phrase. Thinking phrase. "Well, I guess that gives you a moment to breathe then," Ethan said. It came out a little slowly, but it came out, and it felt natural. Ben laughed. "Exactly. It's nice while it lasts." He handed Ethan his latte. "Have a good one." "You too," Ethan replied. He walked away from the counter feeling ridiculously proud of himself. It was a tiny, insignificant conversation. It lasted maybe 20 seconds. But for Ethan, it was a breakthrough. He had a real, spontaneous conversation in English. He hadn't planned it. He hadn't translated it. He had used a thinking phrase to bridge a gap, and it had worked. He decided to double down on the practice. That week, he made a point of having one small conversation every day. He asked the security guard about the weather. He commented on a book a colleague was reading in the break room. He even called the IT help desk about a minor issue with his computer, just for the chance to practice explaining a problem in English. Some conversations were smoother than others. There were still moments when he fumbled for a word or when his accent felt thick in his mouth. But he remembered Clara's advice. The goal wasn't perfection. The goal was practice. Each time he did it, it got a tiny bit easier. The pathways in his brain were getting stronger. He also changed his environment. Following another piece of Clara's advice, he started immersing himself in English. He changed the language on his phone to English. It was confusing for the first day, but he quickly adapted. This simple change meant that he was seeing and using English for dozens of tiny tasks every day, from checking the weather to setting an alarm. On his commute to work, instead of listening to music in his native language, he started listening to English language podcasts. At first, he chose podcasts for learners, but he found them a bit slow and boring. Clara had suggested finding something he was genuinely interested in. Ethan loved history, so he found a podcast about historical events. At first, he could only catch maybe 60% of what was being said. He didn't understand every word, but he forced himself not to panic or translate. He just tried to get the general idea, the gist of the story. Over time, his ear began to adjust to the speed and rhythm of native speech. He was absorbing the flow of the language, not just the individual words. In the evenings, instead of watching movies dubbed into his own language, he started watching them in English. First, he used subtitles in his native language. Then, he bravely switched to English subtitles. This was a game changer. He could see the words as he heard them, connecting the spelling to the sound. He started noticing idioms and slang that he would never find in a textbook. He would pause the movie and repeat a line out loud, trying to mimic the actor's intonation. He was learning phrases like, "Let's call it a day," or "It's not rocket science" in their natural context. These activities, the narration, the thinking phrases, the low-stakes conversations, and the immersion started to weave together. He would hear a phrase in a podcast, then try to use it in his internal narration. He would learn a new word from a movie subtitle, then look for an opportunity to use it in a low-stakes chat. His brain was becoming a dynamic English environment, rather than a static storage library for rules and words. One afternoon, about a week and a half before his big presentation, he was in a team meeting. It was a smaller, more informal discussion than the one where he had frozen before. Daniel was talking about a problem with some new data they had received. "The formatting is all over the place," Daniel complained. "It's going to take ages to clean it up before we can even start analyzing it." Without even thinking, Ethan spoke up. "Well, to be honest, I think I might have a solution for that." The words just came out. He hadn't planned them. He hadn't translated them. He had simply had a thought and expressed it, using one of his new launchpad phrases. Everyone at the table turned to look at him. For a second, he felt a flash of his old panic, but then he took a breath. He continued, speaking a little more slowly than his colleagues, but with a new steadiness. "I wrote a script a while ago to automate data cleaning for a similar project. Let me think for a second. Yes, I'm pretty sure I can adapt it for this. It could probably clean the entire data set in under an hour. A silence fell over the room, but this time it wasn't an awkward silence. It was a silence of surprise and interest. Daniel broke the silence. "Ethan, that's brilliant. Seriously? That would save us days of work." Ethan felt a smile spread across his face. "Yes. The way I see it, it's much more efficient than doing it manually. I can take a look at it this afternoon." He had done it. He had participated in a meeting. He had offered a valuable solution. He hadn't been perfect. His grammar might have had a small mistake or two, but he had been effective. He had communicated. As he left the meeting, he felt a sense of confidence that was entirely new. It wasn't the confidence of knowing all the answers. It was the confidence of knowing he could express the answers he had. The presentation still felt daunting, but it no longer felt impossible. He was ready to face it. The morning of the presentation arrived. Ethan woke up with a familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach, but it was different this time. It was mixed with a strange sense of excitement, like the feeling before a big race. He had prepared meticulously. He knew his data, he knew his slides, and he knew his key points. But more importantly, he had spent the last 3 weeks fundamentally changing his relationship with the English language. He had gone from being a translator to being a thinker. He put on his best suit. As he got ready, he continued the narration practice that had become second nature. "I am putting on my tie. The knot is a little crooked. Okay, that is better. I am feeling nervous, but I am also feeling ready." It was calming, this simple act of staying in the English zone. At the office, he went to the conference room and set up his laptop. His hands were a little shaky as he connected the cables. Clara stopped by the door and gave him a thumbs up. "You've got this, Ethan," she whispered. He gave her a grateful smile. His manager, Mr. Evans, and his team lead, Daniel, came in and sat down. The video call connected, and suddenly the faces of the European partners appeared on the large screen. There were 4 of them, all looking serious and professional. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Evans began, handling the introductions. "And leading our deep dive into the data today will be our senior analyst, Ethan." All eyes, both in the room and on the screen, turned to him. This was it, the moment of truth. Ethan took a slow, deep breath. He looked at the camera, trying to make eye contact with the faces on the screen. He started, not with a complex, memorized sentence, but with one of his simple, effective tools. "Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today," he said, his voice clear and steady. "The way I see it, the data from the last quarter tells a very interesting story, and I'm excited to walk you through it." He began his presentation. He moved through the slides explaining the charts and graphs. He didn't try to use fancy, complex vocabulary. He used simple, direct language to explain the complex ideas he had uncovered. He focused on communication, not on linguistic perfection. He found himself using the thinking phrases naturally to transition between points. Now, that brings me to my next point, which is about customer demographics. This next slide is particularly interesting. To be honest, the results here were quite surprising to us. He was in a state of flow. The English words were connecting directly to the ideas in his head. The translation factory had been shut down. He was no longer a ghost at the table. He was the one leading the conversation. After about 15 minutes, one of the partners from Germany, a stern-looking man named Mr. Keller, interrupted him. Mr. Ethan, he said, his accent sharp, can you go back one slide? I do not understand the correlation you are making between the social media campaign and the sales figures. The timeline does not seem to align. This was the moment Ethan had dreaded. An unexpected, challenging question. The old Ethan would have frozen. His mind would have gone completely blank as he scrambled to translate the question and then translate an answer. But this was the new Ethan. He took a breath and used one of his bridges. That's an excellent question, Mr. Keller. Thank you for pointing that out, he said calmly. This simple phrase did 3 things. It bought him 5 precious seconds of thinking time. It validated the client's question, and it made him sound confident and in control. In those 5 seconds, his mind was clear. He wasn't translating. He was thinking. He looked at the slide and immediately saw the source of the confusion. Let me clarify that for you, he continued smoothly. You're right. Looking at the main timeline, it seems disconnected. However, what this chart doesn't show is the delayed conversion effect we've been tracking. As a matter of fact, if we look at the data from 2 weeks after the campaign ended, which is on the next slide, you'll see a very clear spike in sales directly attributable to those social media leads. Let me just jump ahead to show you. He clicked to the next slide, which perfectly illustrated his point. There was a murmur of understanding from the partners on the screen. Mr. Keller nodded, looking impressed. I see. Yes, that is much clearer now. Thank you. Ethan had not only answered the question, but he had done it with grace and authority. He had turned a moment of potential crisis into an opportunity to demonstrate his deep understanding of the material. From that point on, he knew he was going to be okay. He finished the rest of his presentation, summarizing his key recommendations with clarity and confidence. When he was done, there was a moment of silence. Then the lead partner from France spoke up. Thank you, Ethan. That was one of the clearest and most insightful data presentations we have seen. Your recommendations are very strong. We have a lot to think about. After the call ended, Mr. Evans turned to Ethan, a wide smile on his face. Ethan, you didn't just do a good job. You were outstanding. Absolutely fantastic. Daniel clapped him on the shoulder. Man, where did that come from? You were a rock star. Ethan felt a wave of relief and pride so powerful it almost made him dizzy. It wasn't just about the presentation. It was about the journey of the last 3 weeks. He had faced his biggest professional fear and had not just survived, but thrived. He had unlocked a part of himself that he thought was lost forever in translation. Later that day, he saw Clara by the coffee machine. She looked at him with a knowing smile. So, how did the recital at Carnegie Hall go? She asked. Ethan laughed, a real, unburdened laugh. It went well, he said. It went really well. I even got a tough question and I used one of the phrases. That's an excellent question. And did it work? She asked. Like a charm, he said. Clara, I can't thank you enough. You didn't just give me English tips. You gave me a completely new way to think. You did the work, Ethan, she said kindly. You were brave enough to feel silly narrating your day and to risk feeling awkward talking to strangers. You earned it. Ethan's journey is a powerful reminder that becoming fluent is less about what you know and more about what you do. It's about changing your habits and your mindset. His story has given us a clear, practical roadmap to follow. So now, let's bring it all back to you. How can you become the Ethan of your own story? Let's review the core techniques and turn them into your personal practice plan. The very first step, the foundation of everything, is the narration method. I want you to start this today, right now, not tomorrow, not next week. As you finish listening to me, I want you to start narrating your next action in your head, in simple English. It could be, I am going to stand up now, or I am going to get a drink of water, or I am thinking about this story. Make this your new mental background noise. Do it when you're cooking, when you're cleaning, when you're walking. At first, it will feel forced and unnatural, but I promise you, if you stick with it, within a few days, you will start to notice small, automatic English thoughts popping into your head. You are building that direct highway between your experience and the English language. The second technique is to build your arsenal of thinking phrases. Ethan's notebook on his phone became his secret weapon. I want you to create one too. Start by writing down the ones we discussed. That's a great question. Let me think about that for a moment. Well, from my perspective, to be honest, the way I see it. But don't stop there. The next time you watch a movie in English or listen to a podcast, have your notebook ready. Listen actively for these little phrases that people use to transition, to pause, and to introduce their ideas. When you hear one, write it down. Your list will grow and become personalized to the way you want to sound. Then, the crucial part is to practice them. Say them out loud. Get used to how they feel in your mouth. This leads us to the third and perhaps most courageous step, practicing in low-stakes conversations. Remember Clara's advice to Ethan. It's about finding opportunities where the pressure is off. This is your training ground. Your challenge for this week is to initiate 3 of these small conversations. Just 3. It could be with a cashier, a neighbor, or a colleague you don't know well. Prepare an opening question. It could be as simple as, having a busy day, or, I like your scarf, where did you get it? The goal is not to have a long, deep conversation. The goal is to successfully start an interaction, listen to the response, and try to use one of your thinking phrases to reply. Each small success will build your confidence for bigger, more important conversations. Finally, there is immersion. You need to make English a part of your world. Change the language on your phone and computer today. Find one podcast you are genuinely interested in, whether it's about comedy, science, business, or sports, and listen to one episode this week. Watch one movie in English with English subtitles. Pay attention to the rhythm, the intonation, the culture embedded in the language. Immersion works because it makes learning passive and constant. You absorb the language naturally, just by living with it. Ethan's story shows us that this transformation is possible. It takes effort, it takes courage, and it takes a willingness to feel a little uncomfortable. But the reward is immense. It is the freedom to express your true self, your intelligence, your humor, your ideas, without the barrier of translation. It is the ability to connect with people and opportunities in a whole new way. So your journey starts now. Pick one of these steps to focus on first. Maybe it's just narrating your evening routine tonight, or maybe it's identifying 3 thinking phrases from a movie. Whatever you choose, start small. Be consistent and be kind to yourself. You are not just learning a language, you are rewiring your brain, and that is a remarkable thing. Thank you for joining me, Jessica, at English in Advance. I hope Ethan's story has inspired you and given you the tools you need to start thinking in English and speaking with the natural fluency you've always wanted. Keep practicing, and I look forward to having you with me for our next session.